My name's Gina. I'm 38 and I live and breathe the world of wedding dresses, running my own atelier salon here in the city. It's a good life, honestly. My husband, Alex, works as an architect, and we've got 2 kids, Sam and Olivia, both in grade school. They're a handful, but in the best way possible. But family? Now that's where it gets messy. You see, my in-laws are a mixed bag. I get along great with Alex's parents and his younger brother, Mike. But Carol, Alex's older sister, is another story. She's 42, been married 3 times, and she is in constant search of a 4th victim. If there were a way to handle her that didn't involve weekly headaches, I'd have found it by now. Let me paint you a picture of a typical family dinner, which will give you a taste of what I deal with. At my in-laws' house, a cozy, well-lit dining room buzzing with chatter. Alex's mom, sweet as ever, is bustling around, setting dishes on the table. Mike and his wife, Jane, are helping with the kids, keeping them entertained. Then there's Carol, draped dramatically on a chair, red wine in hand, voice loud enough to drown out the rest. Carol, waving her glass, says, "So, Gina, still playing dress up with those brides? When are you going to design something real, like haute couture or something?" I bite my tongue, focusing on dishing out some mashed potatoes. I've learned that engaging with Carol only fuels her fire. Mike chimes in, trying to change the subject. "Hey, Carol, heard you're planning another wedding. What's the lucky guy like?" Carol smirks. "Oh, you know, successful, rich, what you'd expect." "Not that you'd understand, little brother." Jane shoots me a sympathetic look. She's been in the trenches with me when it comes to handling Carol. We share an eye roll. The dinner progresses with the usual banter, some of it good-natured, some of it barbed, especially from Carol. She's got a knack for steering conversations back to her favorite subject, herself. Alex, catching my eye, gives me an encouraging nod. We're a team, after all, and dealing with Carol is just one of those family hurdles we navigate together. The evening wraps up with promises to meet again next month. I hug my mother-in-law goodbye, feeling the solidarity in her tight squeeze. Driving home, Alex reaches over to squeeze my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I sigh, watching the city lights blur past. "Just another day in the life, right?" "Right," Alex agrees, a smile in his voice. "But hey, we've got each other, and that's what counts." And he's right. Despite the Carol-induced drama, we have a solid little world of our own, and nothing, not even a sister-in-law with a penchant for theatrics, can take that away from us. One typical Thursday morning found me knee-deep in tulle and satin, sketching out a new design that had popped into my head overnight. The atelier was quiet, save for the soft hum of the sewing machine from the corner where my assistant, Lisa, was working on a rush order. That's when my phone buzzed, a call from Jane, my brother-in-law Mike's wife. "Hey Gina, guess what? You will not believe what I just heard." Jane's voice crackled with mischief over the phone. I leaned back in my chair, ready for a bit of gossip to break up the morning monotony. "Hit me. What's the latest?" "So, Carol's getting married again. 4th time's the charm, right?" Jane laughed, and I couldn't help but chuckle along. "Seriously? Again? What is it this time? Did she find another millionaire looking for a trophy wife?" I asked, half joking. "Bingo, some real estate mogul from out of town. She's planning the wedding of the century. Again. You're probably going to get the SOS for a dress soon, so brace yourself," Jane warned. I sighed, picturing the impending headache. "Well, thanks for the heads up. I guess I should start stocking up on aspirin and patience." Just then, Lisa piped up from her sewing station, having overheard parts of the conversation. Not Carol again. Her last dress was a nightmare to adjust. Remember how she kept changing her mind about the lace? "Yeah, I remember," I replied, rubbing my temples just thinking about it. "Well, let's just hope she finds another designer this time around." But fate, and Carol, had other plans. No sooner had I hung up with Jane than the front bell of the atelier tinkled, announcing a visitor. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear. Carol, draped in a designer scarf and oversized sunglasses, strutted into my shop like she owned the place. Her mother, Helen, followed behind, her expression apologetic. Gina, darling, I need your magic hands again. We have a wedding to plan. Carol announced loudly, removing her sunglasses and looking around the atelier with barely concealed disdain. I forced a smile, masking my reluctance. Carol, congratulations on the engagement. But are you sure you want to go through the dressmaking process with me again? It was quite a ride last time. Oh, come on, who else in this town can handle my exquisite taste? Plus, you owe me a favor for not completely ruining the last dress, Carol quipped, her laugh sharp and short. Helen gave me a pleading look. Gina, dear, I know Carol can be a bit much, but we would really appreciate your help. You know, family. Yeah, family, I echoed, the word tasting sour in my mouth. All right, Carol. Let's see what we can do. But this time, we're doing things my way. Agreed? Carol pursed her lips, clearly not pleased with the conditions, but nodded anyway. Fine, but I have specific ideas this time. It needs to be spectacular. More spectacular than the last 3. As they left, I turned to Lisa, who was smirking. What did I do to deserve this? Lisa shrugged, her eyes twinkling with sympathy. Who knows? But hey, if anyone can handle Carol's craziness, it's you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of fabric and sketches, but Carol's impending 4th wedding, and the gown that would surely be a thorn in my side, loomed large in my thoughts. The following week, true to her word, Carol stormed into my atelier with a thick folder under her arm and a fiery determination in her eyes. Her mom, Helen, tagged along, her smile tight, like she was bracing herself for the hurricane that was her daughter. All right, Gina, I've been all over Pinterest and Instagram. I know exactly what I want this time. It's going to be bold, beautiful, and a bit scandalous, Carol declared, slamming the folder onto my work table and flipping it open to reveal a collection of the most over-the-top wedding dress designs I'd ever seen. I took a deep breath, skimming through her pics. Carol, these designs, they're quite youthful. Are you sure this is the route you want to go down? What's that supposed to mean, Gina? You think I can't pull off these styles? Is that it? Carol snapped, her voice sharp. No, it's not that. It's just that these are very revealing. Maybe we could adapt some elements to make it more you, I suggested, trying to keep the peace and steer her towards something more flattering. Carol waved off my concerns. I know what I want, Gina. And I want this. A dress that'll make everyone's jaw drop. So, can you do it or what? Resigned, I nodded, pulling out my sketch pad. Okay, let's fine-tune the ideas a bit. How about we start with the silhouette? Something that complements your figure? As I started sketching, Carol peered over my shoulder, her critique as subtle as a sledgehammer. No, that's too modest. I want it low-cut, and maybe some high slits. Think sexy, Gina, think well. And don't forget, I want it white, pure white. I paused, pencil midair. White, again? Carol, you've worn white at your last 3 weddings. Maybe we could try something new? Like a soft peach or even a bold red? Carol slammed her hand down on the table. White, Gina. I'm not some second-rate bride. I want white, the whitest white you've got. And throw in some crystals and pearls. Lots of them. The fitting sessions that followed were no less dramatic. Each time Carol visited, she demanded changes. More beads here, fewer stitches there. Make it more fabulous, Gina. It's not hitting the spectacular mark yet. And each request was delivered with a please that sounded more like a command. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session where Carol had decided the neckline wasn't deep enough for the 3rd time, I vented to Lisa, who'd been through every step of the ordeal with me. Lisa, if I have to redraw that neckline one more time, I might just turn that dress into a curtain. Lisa chuckled, handing me a cup of tea. Hang in there, boss. It's almost over. And hey, at least it'll be a wedding no one will forget, especially with Carol wearing one of your creations. As I went back to my sketches, adjusting yet another frill, I braced myself for the next fitting. Carol's wedding was fast approaching, and I had a feeling the real drama was yet to unfold. Today was crucial. I had finally completed the cost breakdown for her elaborate wedding dress, and it was time to discuss the numbers. Carol swept into the atelier with her usual flair, trailing a scent of expensive perfume that lingered long after she passed by. Her mother, Helen, followed, wearing an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "All right, Gina, let's see if you've outdone yourself this time," Carol announced, barely glancing at the sketches and fabric samples laid out for her approval. I took a deep breath and handed her the itemized invoice. "Here's the breakdown, Carol. Given the materials and labor, the total comes to $2,500. I've already applied a 30% family discount." Carol's eyes widened as she scanned the document. She slammed it down on the table, causing a spool of thread to roll off and clatter to the floor. "Listen, Gina, I'm marrying a top businessman. There will be loads of rich, influential guests at my wedding. Think of this as a prime advertising opportunity for you. You should be paying me for wearing your dress." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Paying you? Carol, I'm already cutting the costs significantly. I can't afford to hand out free dresses, even for family." Helen interjected, trying to smooth things over. "Carol, honey, Gina's been more than fair. Let's not." Carol cut her off, her voice rising. "No, Mom. This is ridiculous. I'm doing her a favor. She should be grateful." The tension in the room was palpable. I crossed my arms, meeting her glare. "Carol, I respect your position, but my business isn't a hobby. I have staff to pay and overheads to meet. I can't give away products for free, exposure or not." Carol's face turned a shade of crimson. "Then you can forget it. I'll find someone else who actually values good publicity." As she stormed out, Helen lingered, her eyes apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Gina. I'll talk to her." I sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and relief as Helen followed her daughter out. The rest of the day was a blur of minor tasks, my mind replaying the confrontation over and over. I was still reeling when I got home and recounted everything to Alex. Alex was livid. "She can't exploit your hard work like that, Gina. It's not fair to you or your employees." Later that evening, just as Alex and I were about to turn in, my phone rang. It was Helen. Her voice was soft, tinged with weariness. "Gina, I've been thinking about this afternoon. Carol's being unreasonable, but could we still make it work? Maybe as a wedding gift? It would mean a lot." The request caught me off guard. After a moment's hesitation, I found myself agreeing, despite the day's drama. "All right, Helen. I'll do it. The dress will be my gift to Carol." Working on Carol's wedding dress had turned my atelier into a battleground of frills and demands. Each fitting with Carol was more exhausting than the last. My staff, tired of her antics, had taken to timing their breaks to escape her visits. Lisa, my lead assistant, whispered to me as she grabbed her purse, "We're heading out for a bit. Text us when the coast is clear." As they left, Carol rolled her eyes. "They're so sensitive. You'd think they'd be used to a little criticism in this business." Trying to keep the peace, I continued pinning the dress, while Carol ranted about the upcoming lavish ceremony. The tension was palpable, and I was mentally counting down the minutes until she would leave. A week before the wedding, my phone buzzed. It was Paula, a close friend and also a friend to Carol. "Hey, are you excited about the wedding? I saw the guest list. It's going to be quite the event." I paused, a needle held midair. "The guest list? I haven't actually seen it. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting. Paula, can you do me a favor and send me the list? Just curious about who's attending." "Sure thing, I'll email it to you now," she replied before hanging up. When the email pinged through, I scrolled through the names, my confusion turning to disbelief. My name was nowhere on it. I wasn't invited. The realization stung more than I expected. Later that evening, I brought it up with Alex. His brow furrowed as he listened. She didn't invite you? After all the work you put into this? Apparently not, I muttered, feeling a mix of anger and humiliation. Together, we called Carol, hoping it was a misunderstanding. But the conversation quickly spiraled. Carol, we noticed Gina isn't on the guest list. There's been a mistake, right? Alex asked, his voice tense. Carol's laughter crackled through the speaker. No mistake. Gina's just the seamstress, why would she be at the wedding? It's for important people. I felt my heart rate pick up, my grip on the phone tightening. But I'm making your dress. As a gift, Carol. More laughter. Yeah, thanks for the dress. But let's not pretend you belong at my wedding, Gina. Just stay home. Alex exploded. How can you be so ungrateful? She's your family. The call ended with Carol hanging up on us, and Alex was livid, pacing the room as he ranted about his sister's cruelty. I sat there, the weight of the entire situation sinking in. The dress I'd poured weeks into, the stress I'd endured, all for a woman who couldn't even respect me enough to acknowledge my presence at her wedding. It was a slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than any harsh words she'd ever said. The final fitting was just a week away, and as Carol strutted into the atelier, you'd think nothing had happened. She was all smiles and demands, acting like she hadn't just snubbed me from the biggest day of her life. As we adjusted the fit, I kept up the charade, acting as though her snub hadn't hurt me. Inside, though, I was churning. I had decided on a plan of subtle revenge, something to give me a small sense of justice, without causing a spectacle. Oh, and I'll need to do one last thing to the dress at my workshop, I mentioned casually as I helped her out of the gown. I'll bring it to your place on the morning of the wedding. Carol, always in a rush, barely nodded. Just make sure it's early. I have a tight schedule, and I don't need any delays, Gina. Understood, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. You won't have any issues. The morning of the wedding arrived, and with the beautifully packaged dress in hand, Alex and I drove to Carol's house. My heart was pounding, not from nervousness about the wedding, but from anticipation of her discovering my little surprise. We were greeted coldly by Carol at the door. She snatched the dress box from my hands, without so much as a thank you. Alex, you can stay. Gina, you should leave now. We wouldn't want to upset the important guests, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I kept my smile, not letting her see how deep her words cut. Of course, Carol. Have a wonderful day. Alex looked at her, anger flaring in his eyes, but he squeezed my hand and chose to leave with me. As we walked back to the car, I felt his support bolstering me. Meanwhile, Mike and his wife Jane, who were supposed to attend the wedding, had been standing nearby and overheard how Carol treated us. Outraged, they decided then and there to skip the ceremony. Mike came over to our car before we could drive away. I can't believe she did that to you, Gina. We're not staying either. It's one thing to be a bridezilla, but it's another to be cruel, Mike said, clearly upset. As we made light of the situation, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Paula, who had stayed at the wedding. Something's going on. Carol looks furious. Did you do something? The text read. I couldn't help but smirk. Nothing much. Just gave her a little wedding gift. Alex and I had just settled down with our morning coffee, the house finally quiet, when a sharp ring of the doorbell shattered the calm. We exchanged weary looks, something in the air told us the day wasn't over just yet. I opened the door to find Carol standing there, red-faced and seething, clutching a simple piece of cloth. Her mother, Helen, stood beside her, a mix of embarrassment and frustration on her face, and Carol's fiancé, a tall, stern-looking man, hovered in the background, his expression grim. What is this, Gina? Carol thrust the cloth at me as if it were evidence in a trial. Explain this now. I took a deep breath, my resolve firm. That's your wedding dress, Carol. With your arrogance and the way you've treated everyone, that piece of cloth is more than generous. Her face twisted with fury. Carol stepped closer, her hand raised as if to strike. "You've ruined my wedding. I should." Helen caught her daughter's arm midair, holding it tightly. "Carol, stop this right now. Violence isn't going to solve anything." The fiancé finally spoke, his voice cold and decisive. "I can't do this, Carol. You're crazy, your tantrum made that clear. The wedding is cancelled." He turned, starting to walk away. "No, please don't leave." Carol's voice cracked, a mix of anger and desperation, but he didn't stop, didn't even look back as he walked down the driveway and disappeared around the corner. Carol, left standing with just her mother, turned her wrath back to me. "Look what you've done. You're happy now? You ruined everything." Before I could respond, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her mother hurrying after her, casting an apologetic look back at us. Closing the door, I leaned against it, feeling Alex's hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just shaken," I admitted, and we moved back to the living room, trying to process the rapid unraveling of the evening. It wasn't long before my phone rang. I answered to hear Jane on the other end, her voice urgent. "Gina, you won't believe it. Carol's refusing to pay the wedding organizers now, and it's turned into a huge mess. They've called the police." My heart sank. Oh no, that sounds awful. Did they really have to call the police? Yes, she was causing a scene, screaming at them, demanding her money back since the wedding didn't go through. "It escalated quickly," Jane explained. As I hung up, I sat down heavily, the guilt gnawing at me. Maybe I went too far, Alex. This all feels like it's spiraling out of control. Alex sat beside me, taking my hand. "You stood up for yourself, Gina. Carol's behavior has been out of line from the start. This is on her, not you." Despite his words, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Carol. She was family, after all, difficult as she was. After the tumult of Carol's would-be wedding day, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the dynamics within our family had undeniably shifted. Alex and I had stopped all communication with Carol. The fallout was more than just a cancelled wedding, it had opened our eyes to deeper, more systemic issues within our family that had been ignored for too long. One quiet Sunday morning, Helen came over for coffee. The atmosphere was tense as she walked in, but her first words broke the ice. "I wanted to say, I'm not upset with you, Gina. If anything, I'm to blame for how Carol turned out. I've always given in to her, ever since she was little. It's hard to admit, but I've spoiled her." I poured her a cup of coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, a light breeze fluttering the curtains. "Helen, you can't blame yourself for Carol's choices. She's an adult, and at some point, she has to take responsibility for her actions." Helen sipped her coffee, her eyes sad. "You're right, Gina. It's just hard, you know? She's my daughter, and I hate seeing her make these mistakes." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I know, and it's clear how much you love her. But enabling her hasn't helped. Maybe now she'll realize she needs to change." The conversation shifted as Helen updated us on the latest rumors swirling around Carol. Apparently, she had racked up considerable debts, banking on a lavish wedding to a wealthy groom to solidify her financial and social standing. Now, with the groom out of the picture and the wedding cancelled, she was reportedly hiding from creditors. "It's a mess," Helen confessed, shaking her head. "She's staying low, trying to figure things out. I just don't know what she's planning to do about all the money she owes." Alex, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Mom, it's a tough situation, but maybe facing these consequences will be good for her in the long run. She might learn to stand on her own, stop relying on others to bail her out." Our discussion was deep, filled with a mix of regret and hope. It was clear Helen felt torn between her love for her daughter and her frustration at Carol's actions. Before Helen left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Gina, for being honest and for handling everything with so much grace. I'm sorry it came to this." I hugged her back, reassuring her. "It's okay, Helen. We're family, and we'll get through this. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but we'll find a way to mend things." After Helen left, Alex and I spent the rest of the day in a reflective silence. The events with Carol had left a mark, reminding us of the complexities of family relationships and the sometimes painful growth that comes from facing hard truths.